Tell me about a time you clarified unclear requirements. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand: check, how you handle ambiguity. Check, how you ask clarifying questions. Check, how you work with product owners and business teams. Check, how you prevent rework. Check, how you align with QA before development. Check, how you convert unclear requirements into clear acceptance criteria. This question is especially important for check, Java developers, backend developers, Spring Boot developers, full-stack developers, senior software developers, team leads, Agile teams, system design interviews. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S. Situation. Explain the background. T. Task. Explain your responsibility. A. Action. Explain what you personally did. R. Result. Explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section, because interviewers want to understand how you identified ambiguity, asked the right questions, and helped the team agree on clear requirements. Question: tell me about a time you clarified unclear requirements. Example 1. Clarifying requirements for a customer search API situation. In one project, the product owner created a story for a customer search feature. The requirement said users should be able to search customers quickly, but it did not clearly define the search filters, sorting, pagination, or access rules. Task: I was responsible for designing and implementing the backend API, so I needed to clarify the requirement before development started. Action: I first reviewed the story and identified the unclear areas. The unclear areas included which fields users could search by, whether pagination was required, default sorting behavior, maximum page size, what should happen when no results are found, which roles could access the search, what validation errors should be returned, whether inactive customers should be included. Then, I scheduled a short discussion with the product owner and QA. I asked business-focused questions instead of technical-only questions. For example, who will use this search feature? What fields do users search most often? Should inactive customers appear in results? Should users see all results or page-by-page results? What should the user see when no customer is found? Should all roles have access to this feature? After the discussion, I converted the answers into clear API behavior. I documented request parameters, response fields, pagination rules, sorting rules, validation rules, role-based access rules, error response examples. I also shared sample JSON responses with QA and front-end developers. Result: the requirements became clear before development started. QA had better test scenarios. The API was implemented with fewer changes during testing because the team agreed on the behavior early. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows handling ambiguity, product owner collaboration, QA alignment, API design, acceptance criteria clarification, reducing rework. Example 2. Clarifying required and optional fields. In one sprint, we were building a user profile update feature. The story listed several fields, but it did not clearly say which fields were required, which were optional, and which fields could be updated by different user roles. Task: I needed to clarify the rules before implementing backend validation and authorization. Action: I reviewed the requirement and created a list of unclear fields. For each field, I asked, check, is this field required? Check, can this field be empty? Check, can normal users update this field? Check, is this field admin only? Check, what validation format is required? Check, what error message should be shown? Check, should the old value remain if the field is missing? Then I discussed these questions with the product owner and QA. We discovered that some fields were optional for normal users but required for admin workflows. I updated the story with a simple field rule table. The table included field name, required or optional, editable role, validation rule, error message, test scenario. Then I implemented the backend validation according to the confirmed rules. I also worked with QA to convert the field rule table into test cases. Result: the validation logic matched the business expectation. QA testing was smoother because expected behavior was clear. The team avoided rework that would have happened if I had assumed the rules incorrectly. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows detailed requirement clarification, validation design, authorization awareness, QA collaboration, documentation, preventing wrong assumptions. Example 3. Clarifying business rules for eligibility logic situation. In one backend project, the business team requested an eligibility check for customer accounts. The rules were written in business language and had several conditions. Some scenarios were unclear, especially for inactive accounts and special account types. Task: I was responsible for translating the business rules into backend service logic. Action: I first reviewed the requirement and identified ambiguous cases. The unclear cases included active customer with inactive account, inactive customer with active account, closed account, special account type, customer with missing status, user without required role, amount over allowed limit, cases needing manual approval. I created a decision table. The decision table showed key input condition, key expected eligibility result, key error message, key approval requirement, key test scenario. Then I reviewed the decision table with the business team, product owner, and QA. Instead of asking only broad questions, I used specific examples. For example, what should happen if the customer is active but the account is closed? This helped the business team make decisions faster. After confirmation, I implemented the eligibility logic in the service layer and added tests for each rule. Result: the backend logic matched the business rules accurately. QA used the decision table as a testing reference. The team avoided confusion because edge cases were clarified before coding was complete. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows correct translating business rules, decision table usage, edge case clarification, backend validation, QA and business alignment, and testable requirements. Example 4. Clarifying error handling requirements situation. In one project, we were building a new API that could fail for different reasons, such as invalid input, missing data, unauthorized access, and downstream service errors. The story did not clearly explain what error messages or status codes should be returned. Task: I needed to clarify error handling requirements before implementing the API. Action: I reviewed the possible failure scenarios and grouped them. The groups included validation errors, unauthorized user, forbidden access, record not found, duplicate request, downstream timeout, unexpected system error. Then, I discussed these scenarios with the product owner, QA, and front-end developer. I asked, check, what message should the user see? Check, should this be a field-level error? Check, should the front-end show a retry option? Check, should the user contact support? Check, should the error be logged for audit? After alignment, I designed a standard error response format. The response included correlation ID, user-friendly message, field-level details where needed, timestamp, correlation ID. I also made sure internal exception details were logged securely but not exposed to users. Result: the API error handling became consistent and testable. Front-end developers knew how to display errors. QA had clear scenarios to validate. Production troubleshooting also improved because correlation IDs were included. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows unclear requirement handling, API error design, front-end collaboration, QA alignment, secure error handling, production support thinking. Example 5. Clarifying reporting calculation rules situation. In one project, the business requested a report that showed daily totals. The story described the final report output, but did not clearly explain how the totals should be calculated. There were questions about date ranges, time zone behavior, and excluded records. Task. I was responsible for implementing the backend calculation logic, so I needed to clarify the business rules. Action. I first reviewed sample data and compared it with the expected report output. Then, I listed the unclear areas. The unclear areas included color, start date and end date behavior, whether end date was inclusive, business time zone, records near midnight, canceled records, inactive records, duplicate records, rounding rules, empty result behavior. I scheduled a discussion with the product owner, business team, and QA. I asked specific scenario-based questions. For example, check. If a record is created at 11:55 p.m. UTC, which business date should it count under? Should canceled records be excluded? Should the end date include the full day? What should the report show if there are no records? After the discussion, I documented the calculation rules. I also created sample input and expected output examples. Result. The report calculation became clear before implementation. QA used key examples for validation. The final report matched the business expectation and avoided later calculation disputes. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows business rule clarification, reporting logic, time zone awareness, sample data validation, QA collaboration, preventing rework. Example 6. Clarifying scope for an MVP release situation. In one project, the product owner requested a dashboard feature with multiple widgets, filters, export functionality, and drill-down pages. The deadline was tight, and the story did not clearly separate must-have items from future enhancements. Task. I needed to clarify the scope so the team could deliver the highest priority functionality without overcommitting. Action. I reviewed the requested functionality and grouped the items. The groups were, must-have for first release, useful but not required for first release, future enhancement, unclear requirement, high-risk item needing more analysis. Then I discussed the list with the product owner. I asked, which features are required for users to start using the dashboard? Which features can wait until the next sprint? Which items have the highest business value? Which items are needed for compliance or reporting? We agreed that the first release would include check summary cards, basic filters, role-based visibility, backend API, validation, QA test coverage. The later release would include export option, advanced filters, drill down page. Result. The team had a clear MVP scope. The first version was delivered on time. The product owner still had a plan for future enhancements, but the sprint goal became realistic. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows Q. Scope clarification, Q. MVP thinking, Q. Stakeholder collaboration, Q. Prioritization, Q. Delivery risk reduction, Q. Agile planning. Example 7. Clarifying integration requirements with another team situation. In one microservices project, our service needed to call another internal service. The story said we needed to send customer data to the downstream system, but it did not clearly define the API contract, security headers, retry behavior, or error handling. Task. I needed to clarify the integration requirements before implementation. Action. I contacted the downstream service team and reviewed the integration details. I clarified. Check. Endpoint URL. Check. Request payload. Response payload. Check. Required headers. Check. Authentication method. Check. Timeout expectations. Check. Retry rules. Error codes. Test data. Lower environment availability. Then I documented the integration contract and shared it with our team, QA, and product owner. I also clarified business behavior for failure scenarios. For example, should the user wait for the downstream response? Should the operation fail if the downstream service is unavailable? Can the update happen asynchronously? Should failed requests be retried? Should failures be audited? Based on the answers, we designed safe timeout handling, error responses, and logging. Result: the integration was implemented with fewer surprises. QA had clear test scenarios. We avoided production risk because failure behavior was clarified before development was complete. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows integration requirement clarification, microservices communication, cross-team collaboration, failure handling, QA alignment, production readiness. Example 8, clarifying security requirements situation. In one project, we were building admin APIs for configuration management. The requirement said only authorized users should access the feature, but it did not clearly define which roles were allowed and what actions each role could perform. Task: I needed to clarify the security requirements before implementing authorization logic. Action: I first listed the admin actions. The actions included view configuration, create configuration, update configuration, delete configuration, view audit history, trigger admin-only action. Then I asked the product owner and business team to confirm role access for each action. We created a role permission matrix. The matrix showed check role name, check allowed actions, check blocked actions, check audit requirement, check expected error response. I also clarified whether some actions required additional approval or audit logging. Then I implemented backend role-based authorization and service layer checks. I added tests for check admin user allowed, check normal user blocked, check missing token, check invalid token, check unauthorized action, check audit log created. Result: the security rules became clear and testable. The admin APIs were implemented safely. QA could validate access control using the role permission matrix. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows check security requirement clarification, role permission matrix, backend authorization, audit logging, QA testing, avoiding security assumptions. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one project, I worked on a customer search API where the initial requirement was unclear. The story said users should be able to search customers quickly, but it did not define filters, sorting, pagination, empty results, or access rules. Before coding, I reviewed the story and listed the unclear areas. Then I discussed them with the product owner and QA. I asked questions like which fields users search by most often, whether inactive customers should appear, what should happen when no results are found, and which roles should have access. After the discussion, I documented the final API behavior, including request parameters, response fields, pagination roles, sorting roles, validation roles, authorization roles, and error response examples. I also shared sample JSON responses with QA and front-end developers. As a result, the requirements were clear before development started. QA had better test scenarios, and the API was implemented with fewer changes during testing. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Assuming the requirement. Bad answer. The story was unclear, so I made the best assumption and started coding. Better answer. I identified unclear areas and clarified them with the product owner and QA before implementation. 2. Asking only technical questions. Bad answer. I asked what endpoint and database table to use. Better answer. I asked what user problem we were solving, what behavior was expected, and what edge cases mattered. 3. Waiting until QA finds the issue. Bad answer. QA found that the requirement was unclear. Better answer. I clarified the acceptance criteria before QA testing started. 4. Not documenting the answer. Bad answer. We discussed it in a meeting. Better answer. I updated the story with confirmed acceptance criteria and shared examples.
5. No result.
Bad answer. The requirement became clear. Better answer. The team avoided rework. QA had clear test cases, and the feature was delivered with fewer defects. Best practices for answering this question. Use the STAR method. Explain what was unclear. Identify the impact of ambiguity. Ask specific questions. Include product owner and QA. Use examples or decision tables. Clarify edge cases. Document acceptance criteria. Share examples of front-end or QA. End with reduced rework or better delivery. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can handle ambiguity, ask good questions, avoid risky assumptions, communicate with product owners, collaborate with QA, define testable acceptance criteria, translate business needs into technical behavior, prevent rework, improve delivery quality. For senior roles, they also want to see requirement analysis leadership, product thinking, stakeholder alignment, risk identification, scope clarification, decision table thinking, ability to turn ambiguity into clear execution. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like clarified, identified ambiguity, aligned, confirmed, documented, refined, translated, validated, reviewed examples, asked scenario-based questions, reduced rework, improved acceptance criteria. Example: I clarified the unclear requirements by identifying ambiguous areas, asking scenario-based questions, aligning with the product owner and QA, documenting acceptance criteria, and sharing sample API responses before development. Good, unclear requirement topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about, quote, customer search API filters, quote, required versus optional fields, business eligibility rules, quote, error handling behavior, quote, reporting calculation rules, quote, MVP scope, integration requirements, quote, security roles and permissions, quote, validation messages, quote, empty result behavior, quote, date and time zone rules, quote, audit logging requirements, data migration mapping, check, front-end back-end API contract, check, performance expectations. Final summary. Tell me about a time you clarified unclear requirements is an important interview question because software developers often work with incomplete or ambiguous stories. The best answer should include what requirement was unclear, why it mattered, your responsibility, what questions you asked, who you involved, how you clarified the behavior, how you documented the decision, how QA or front-end used the clarification, what result improved. Good examples include Customer Search API clarification, Customer Search API required and optional field clarification, eligibility rule clarification, error handling clarification, reporting calculation clarification, MVP scope clarification, integration requirement clarification, security role clarification. The strongest answers show communication, ownership, business understanding, QA alignment, and prevention of rework.